General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander. His orchestration of history's most elaborate military deception turned Hitler's strategic genius into his greatest vulnerability. The moment Hitler realized Eisenhower outsmarted his entire army. You do not deceive Adolf Hitler. This was not arrogance. This was historical fact. By 1944, the Führer had spent 20 years reading his enemies, predicting their moves, exploiting their weaknesses. He had outmaneuvered Chamberlain at Munich. He had stunned Stalin with Operation Barbarossa. He had anticipated every Allied move in North Africa, Italy, and the Atlantic. His intelligence apparatus was formidable. The Abwehr employed thousands of agents across Europe. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flew constant patrols over the English Channel. Radio intercept stations monitored every Allied transmission. Wehrmacht analysts studied weather patterns, tide tables, troop movements, supply shipments. And Hitler himself was obsessed with the coming invasion. He knew it was coming. Everyone knew it was coming. The only questions were where and when. By spring 1944, Hitler had convinced himself he knew both answers. The invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, just 21 miles of water, the most direct route to Germany's industrial heartland. It was obvious. It was logical. It was what he would do. He positioned his most powerful units there. The 15th Army, 19 divisions, 250,000 men, the best equipped force in France. He built the Atlantic Wall's strongest fortifications there. He stockpiled reserves there. Every strategic decision from March through June 1944 was built on one unshakable conviction. Calais was the target. Hitler's generals agreed. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the supreme commander in France, placed his bets on Calais. Rommel, commanding Army Group B, fortified Calais above all other sectors. German intelligence confirmed it. Allied forces were massing directly across from Calais. Radio traffic was heaviest there. Reconnaissance photos showed tank formations, supply dumps, landing craft. The evidence was overwhelming. The logic was airtight. Hitler was certain. But on June 6, 1944 at 6:30 in the morning, German sentries on the beaches of Normandy, 150 miles west of Calais, looked up and saw 5,000 ships on the horizon. And in that moment, Adolf Hitler realized he had been played. His name was Dwight David Eisenhower. 53 years old. Kansas farm boy. West Point graduate, class of 1915. A man who had spent 28 years in the army without commanding troops in combat. A staff officer. A planner. A politician in uniform. When George Marshall selected him to command Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, the choice shocked the military establishment. MacArthur had more combat experience. Patton had more battlefield victories. Montgomery had more strategic credentials. But Marshall didn't choose Eisenhower for his battlefield resume. He chose him because Eisenhower understood something the others didn't. This war would not be won by tactical brilliance alone. It would be won by whoever could coordinate a million moving pieces without letting ego, nationalism, or military doctrine get in the way, and it would be won by whoever could make Hitler look in the wrong direction. In January 1944, Eisenhower arrived in London to take command. The invasion was scheduled for late spring. That gave him 5 months to solve an impossible problem. How do you hide an invasion force of 3 million men, 11,000 aircraft, and 5,000 ships from an enemy who controls the entire coastline? The answer: you don't hide it. You make Hitler see exactly what you want him to see. Operation Fortitude. The code name for the most elaborate deception operation in military history. It had two objectives: convince Hitler the invasion would come at Calais, and convince him that even after the real invasion began, Normandy was just a diversion. Eisenhower placed Lieutenant General George Patton in command of the 1st U.S. Army Group, Fusag, an entire phantom army that existed only in German imagination. Patton was perfect for this. The Germans respected him, feared him. They believed if anyone would lead the main invasion, it would be Patton. Fusag was headquartered in southeastern England, directly across from Calais. And the Germans watched it grow. They saw tent cities appear. They saw tank formations on reconnaissance photos, hundreds of Sherman tanks arranged in neat rows near Dover and Folkestone. Except the tanks were inflatable. Rubber and canvas inflated with air pumps, painted to look real from the air. Engineers built fake landing craft, plywood and canvas frames that floated in harbors, visible to German reconnaissance but incapable of crossing a river, let alone the English Channel. The Allies broadcast fake radio traffic. Thousands of transmissions per day, supply requests, troop movements, weather reports, all following proper military protocol, all suggesting Fusag was preparing for a massive assault on Calais. German radio intercept stations recorded every transmission. Analysts plotted the data on maps. The conclusion was inescapable. An army of 150,000 men was massing across from Calais. But the masterstroke, the element that made everything believable, was the double agents. British intelligence had captured or turned every German spy in England. Every single one. The Abwehr thought they had 60 agents feeding them intelligence. In reality, all 60 were controlled by MI5 and working for Eisenhower. These double agents sent reports to Berlin confirming everything Hitler wanted to believe. They described Patton's army. They provided details about unit insignia, equipment types, training exercises. They reported on fake supply shipments and non-existent divisions. And Hitler believed every word. Because the intelligence fit his expectations. Because it confirmed his logic. Because dismissing it meant admitting he might be wrong. Eisenhower watched this unfold from his headquarters in London. He read the decrypted German communications. The Allies had broken the Enigma code so he could read Hitler's orders in real time. He saw Hitler reinforcing Calais. He saw Panzer divisions being positioned east of Normandy, away from the actual target. The deception was working. But Eisenhower knew the hardest part was still ahead, making Hitler believe the lie even after the truth was staring him in the face. On June 5, 1944, Eisenhower made the final decision. The weather was marginal, storms in the Channel, heavy clouds, rough seas. His meteorologists found a narrow window, 36 hours of semi-acceptable conditions starting the morning of June 6. Eisenhower gave the order, "Okay, we'll go." 5,000 ships began moving toward Normandy. And in Germany, Adolf Hitler went to sleep believing the invasion was still weeks away. June 6, 1944. 12:15 a.m. The first Allied soldiers hit French soil, American paratroopers dropping into the darkness over the Cotentin Peninsula. Within an hour, 13,000 paratroopers are scattered across Normandy. The invasion has begun. German sentries report the drops to regional headquarters. The 7th Army, responsible for Normandy's defense, goes on alert. Commanders wake their staff officers. Messages are sent up the chain of command. At 2:30 a.m., the reports reach Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's headquarters. Rommel isn't there. He's in Germany visiting his wife for her birthday. He left yesterday convinced the weather was too poor for an invasion. His chief of staff reads the reports. Paratroop drops, possibly a raid, possibly something larger. The question goes up to Hitler's headquarters: should we wake the Führer? Hitler's staff makes the decision: no. The Führer went to bed at 3 a.m. after watching a film. His standing orders are not to be disturbed before 10 a.m. And besides, these reports are unclear. Probably a diversionary raid. Not worth waking him. At 5:30 a.m. the naval bombardment begins. 7 battleships, 18 cruisers, 43 destroyers, Allied warships open fire on Normandy's beaches. Thousands of shells per minute. The thunder can be heard 50 miles inland. German coastal defenders crouch in their bunkers and pray the concrete holds. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing craft hit the beaches. Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, Gold, Juno, Sword. 156,000 men in the first wave. The largest amphibious assault in human history is underway, and Adolf Hitler is still asleep. At 10 a.m., Hitler's valet finally wakes him. An aide briefs him on the situation. Large-scale landings in Normandy, multiple beaches, heavy fighting. Allied forces are pushing inland. Hitler listens. Then he asks the only question that matters: where is the 15th Army? The answer: still at Calais. Waiting for the real invasion. Because Hitler doesn't believe this is real. He believes Normandy is a feint, a diversionary attack meant to draw German reserves away from Calais. The real invasion, the main force, Patton's army, that will come at Calais in a few days. He's certain of it. His intelligence confirms this. Reports from agents in England describe Fusag as still preparing for embarkation. Radio intercepts show no change in activity across from Calais. Reconnaissance photos show the tank formation still in place. Hitler issues his orders. The 15th Army will hold position at Calais. No units are to be transferred to Normandy without his personal authorization. The Panzer reserves, the 12th SS Panzer Division, the Panzer Lehr Division, will remain east of Normandy, positioned to counterattack when the real invasion begins. Rommel, racing back to France, is frantic. He calls headquarters and begs for permission to move the panzers to Normandy immediately. He's told, negative. The Führer's orders are explicit. By noon, Allied forces have established 5 beachheads. By nightfall, 156,000 men are ashore. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's impenetrable fortress, has been breached in a single day. And still Hitler waits for Patton. June 7th. Day 2. Allied forces push inland. The Americans capture St. Mère-Église. The British advance toward Cannes. German defenders fight ferociously, but they're outnumbered and isolated. They keep asking, where are the Panzers? Where are the reserves? The answer, still at Calais. Still waiting. Hitler reviews the intelligence again. His analysts assure him, Fusag has not moved. Patton's army is still in southeastern England. The force in Normandy is too small to be the main invasion. This must be a diversion. But doubts are creeping in. Some generals are questioning the assumption. What if the intelligence is wrong? What if Normandy is the real invasion? Hitler refuses to accept it. He has committed too much to the Calais theory. Changing course now means admitting he was deceived. Admitting that his intelligence apparatus failed. Admitting that the Allies outsmarted him. He cannot admit these things. So he doubles down. June 8, 9-10. The days blur together. Allied forces expand the beachhead. Supply ships arrive in continuous streams. Eisenhower's logistical planners have created an artificial harbor using prefabricated concrete sections called mulberries. Tanks, artillery, ammunition, fuel, everything an army needs is pouring onto French soil. German commanders in Normandy send desperate messages. We need reinforcements now. The enemy is consolidating. If we don't counterattack in the next 72 hours, we will lose Normandy permanently. Hitler's response, hold your positions. The main invasion is still coming at Calais. June 17th. 11 days after D-Day. Hitler finally authorizes the release of 2 Panzer divisions to Normandy. But it's a half measure. He keeps the majority of the 15th Army at Calais. He keeps the reserves east of Normandy. What? Because his double agents in England are still reporting that Fusag is preparing to embark. Because radio intercepts still show activity across from Calais. Because reconnaissance photos still show those tank formations in southeastern England. None of it is real. The agents work for Eisenhower. The radio traffic is fake. The tanks are inflatable rubber. But Hitler doesn't know this. He can't know this. His entire intelligence picture is a fiction written by Allied deception planners. On June 18th, the 2 Panzer divisions finally reach Normandy. They launch a counterattack near Cannes. It's too little too late. Allied air superiority shreds the tank columns before they can mass for an assault. Within 48 hours, both divisions are combat ineffective. By the end of June, the Allies have landed over 850,000 men in Normandy. They control a lodgment 60 miles wide and 15 miles deep. The breakout is coming. And still, impossibly, Hitler keeps 19 divisions at Calais. If you find this kind of strategic deception as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of military genius and psychological warfare deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. July 25th. Operation Cobra. The American breakout from Normandy begins with the largest aerial bombardment in history, 2,500 bombers dropping 4,000 tons of high explosives in a single hour. German lines shatter. Patton's Third Army, their poet real Third Army, not the phantom one, explodes through the gap. And finally, after 7 weeks of waiting, Hitler understands. There will be no invasion at Calais. There never was going to be. Fusag was a ghost. Patton's army was plywood and radio transmissions. Every intelligence report, every agent message, every reconnaissance photo, all of it was orchestrated by Eisenhower. Hitler had positioned 250,000 of his best troops to defend against an invasion that existed only in his mind. While he watched Calais, Eisenhower took Normandy. While he waited for Patton's Phantom Army, the real Allied force built an unbreakable lodgment in France. The deception was so complete, so total, that Hitler kept divisions at Calais until late July, 53 days after D-Day, still half believing the intelligence his agents were feeding him. By the time he finally admitted the truth, it was too late. The Allies were racing across France. Paris would fall in August. The Rhine would be crossed in March. Berlin would fall in May. The war in Europe would last another 11 months. But it was decided in those first 7 weeks, when Hitler stared at Normandy and couldn't believe what he was seeing. When he chose to trust his intelligence over his instincts. When he allowed Eisenhower to turn the Wehrmacht's greatest strength, its intelligence apparatus, into its fatal weakness. What Eisenhower did to Hitler wasn't just tactical deception. It was strategic paralysis. For 7 crucial weeks, Germany's most powerful army sat idle at Calais while the actual invasion consolidated in Normandy. Those 19 divisions, 250,000 men, hundreds of tanks, thousands of artillery pieces, could have destroyed the Allied beachhead in its most vulnerable phase. Military historians have run the scenarios. If Hitler had committed the 15th Army to Normandy in the first week, the Allies would have faced a force nearly equal to their own. The beachhead could have been contained. The breakout could have been prevented. D-Day might have become a catastrophic failure requiring years to attempt again. But those divisions never came. They sat at Calais waiting for ghosts. The strategic impact rippled through the entire war. With Normandy secure, Eisenhower opened a second front that Germany could not afford. Hitler was now fighting in France, Italy, and Russia simultaneously. His oil reserves dwindled. His production capacity collapsed. His army bled out in a three-front war that he could not win. The psychological impact was even more devastating. Hitler's confidence in his own judgment was shattered. He began questioning his intelligence services. He dismissed experienced officers and replaced them with yes-men. His decision-making became erratic, paranoid, disconnected from reality. By August 1944 he was ordering counterattacks that had no chance of success, refusing to authorize retreats that could have saved entire armies, micromanaging tactical details while ignoring strategic collapse. The man who had outmaneuvered Europe's diplomats in the 1930s was now losing basic military logic. His generals noticed. Some began plotting to remove him. The July 20th assassination attempt was carried out by officers who believed Hitler's incompetence was killing Germany faster than the Allies were. But the deepest impact was doctrinal. Eisenhower had proven that in modern warfare, controlling your enemy's perception is more powerful than controlling territory. Operation Fortitude became required study at every military academy in the world. The Soviets studied it and applied its lessons in their Cold War Maskirovka doctrine, strategic deception designed to paralyze enemy decision-making. The Americans institutionalized deception planning in every major operation from Korea to Desert Storm. The British learned that their double-agent system, the double-cross network that fed Hitler false intelligence, was more valuable than an entire army division. That system's methods are still classified and still in use today. And future enemies learned a darker lesson. You cannot trust your intelligence if your enemy controls your sources. Every spy might be a double agent. Every report might be disinformation. Every assumption might be exactly what your enemy wants you to believe. Operation Fortitude changed warfare by proving that the human mind is the ultimate battlefield. Eisenhower didn't defeat Hitler with superior tanks or better soldiers. He defeated him with a carefully constructed lie that exploited Hitler's arrogance, his assumptions, and his desperate need to be right. Hitler lost the war on June 6, 1944. He just didn't realize it until July. And by then Eisenhower was already in Paris. Dwight Eisenhower stood on the Normandy beaches in March 1945, 9 months after D-Day. The war in Europe was nearly over. Berlin was surrounded. Hitler was in a bunker, awaiting the end. Eisenhower walked past the rusted remains of German fortifications. He stood where 2,500 Americans had died on Omaha Beach. He thought about the decision he made that morning in June, to launch the invasion despite marginal weather, despite the risk, despite the possibility of catastrophic failure. But the risk that haunted him wasn't the weather or the German defenses. It was the deception. If Hitler had seen through Operation Fortitude, if even one double agent had been exposed, if one fake tank had been investigated too closely, if German intelligence had questioned their assumptions, the entire invasion could have collapsed. Eisenhower later wrote that Fortitude was the greatest gamble of the war. Not D-Day itself but the lie that made D-Day possible. Because if the deception had failed, 156,000 men would have landed on Normandy's beaches facing the full weight of Germany's reserves. The casualties would have been catastrophic. The beachhead might have been thrown back into the sea. But the deception didn't fail. Hitler believed it until it was too late. And in that failure of belief, Nazi Germany's fate was sealed. Eisenhower returned to the United States as the most celebrated general since Grant. He became Columbia University's president, then NATO's first supreme commander, then president of the United States for 8 years. He never commanded troops in direct combat, but he commanded the largest military operation in human history, and won it with a plywood army and a phantom general. The double agents who made Fortitude possible were never publicly recognized. Their identities remained classified for decades. Some lived ordinary lives after the war, carrying the secret that they had helped defeat Hitler without firing a shot. One of them, a Spaniard codenamed Garbo, was awarded medals by both Britain and Germany, the only person in history honored by both sides of the war, though the Germans never knew they were decorating a double agent. The planners of Operation Fortitude, the intelligence officers, the deception specialists, the engineers who built fake tanks, the radio operators who transmitted false messages, they too vanished into history. No monuments were built for them. No battles carry their names. But every military deception operation since 1944 stands on their shoulders. Every feint, every misdirection, every psychological operation in modern warfare traces its lineage to those 5 months in 1944 when Eisenhower convinced Hitler to look the wrong way. The fake tanks still exist. Some are in museums now, deflated rubber shells, painted canvas, the ghosts that paralyzed an army. Visitors walk past them without understanding what they're seeing. These aren't relics. They're weapons. They destroyed more German divisions than entire tank brigades. To this day, military historians debate whether D-Day could have succeeded without fortitude. The numbers suggest it couldn't have. The German defenders in Normandy barely held the beachheads with the forces they had. If 19 additional divisions had counterattacked in the first week, the outcome would have been different. Which means that the inflatable tanks, the fake radio traffic, and the double agents didn't just help win D-Day. They made D-Day possible. They were the true secret weapon. Not technology or firepower, but the ability to make an enemy see a reality that didn't exist. Eisenhower understood something that most generals never grasp. Your enemy's assumptions are their greatest vulnerability. Hitler assumed the invasion would come at Calais because it was logical. That logic became a cage. And Eisenhower locked him inside it. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. The man who had conquered most of Europe couldn't understand how it had all collapsed so quickly. He blamed his generals. He blamed betrayal. He blamed fate. He never fully comprehended that he had been defeated by a farm boy from Kansas who understood that the most powerful weapon in war isn't steel, it's belief. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. Dwight D. Eisenhower died in 1969 at age 78. He lived long enough to see the world he helped create. A world where NATO contained Soviet expansion, where Germany was rebuilt and democratic, where the lessons of deception warfare had reshaped military doctrine forever. The beaches of Normandy are quiet now. Tourists walk on the sand where men died. Monuments list the names of the fallen. But there's no monument to Operation Fortitude. No memorial to the Phantom Army that saved thousands of lives by never existing. Perhaps that's fitting. The greatest deception in history remains invisible, even in memory. Thank you for ensuring that General Dwight D. Eisenhower and the architects of Operation Fortitude are not forgotten. They proved that victory belongs not to the strongest but to the smartest. They deserve to be remembered.